What's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about Unit 3, Topic 3.3, which is Short Run Aggregate Supply, or the SRAS. In this video, we're going to talk about sticky wages and sticky prices. We're going to talk about the shifters for the Short Run Aggregate Supply curve, and then we're going to talk about inflationary expectations. So let's go ahead and get to it. Topic 3.3, Short Run Aggregate Supply curve. All right, so what is aggregate supply? Aggregate supply is the amount of goods and services, so essentially the real GDP, that firms will produce in the economy at different price levels, right? The supply of for everything from every firm. So just like aggregate demand, right, is the demand from everybody in the economy, this is going to be the supply, right, the other side of that from everybody in the economy. So the aggregate supply curve differentiates between a short run and a long run, right? And those are going to be two different curves. Now, don't think of short run and long run as a time. It's not a time thing. It's not like in the short run that's a real quick, that's going to happen very rapidly. When we're talking about long run and we're talking about short run, we're talking about the different variables. So in the long run, variables are more flexible, right, or movable. In the short run, they're fixed, right? So our variables are fixed in the short run. So a good example of short run and long run is that if we are building tables in our factory, right? We're building tables, classroom tables, right? Those chairs. And, we get a call from the superintendent and they're like, hey, normally you're able to produce 100 chairs in a month period. But what we need 1,000 chairs at the end of the month, right? So what we can do is everything's our factory is fixed, right? So we cannot, buy new machinery real quick to start producing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at man hours, right? And we're going to start having employees work a little bit longer, right? To produce these tables, to produce the 1,000 tables. So again, everything is fixed except for, of course, the man hours in that example. Now, in the long run, right, we would, buy another factory, and in that factory, we'd be able to produce more school desks, right? So that's the difference between essentially long run and short run, right? So, just definition-wise, short run aggregate supply is wages and resource prices are sticky and will not change as price levels change, right? Wages, and in the long run, wages and price levels are flexible and will change as price levels change, right? Now, what does a short run aggregate supply curve look like? Well, let's look at this real quick. Short run aggregate supply is, again, in our ADAS model, okay? So we got price level. Remember to label it PL for price level, and then real GDP, so GDP R, okay? And then it's going to be an upward sloping curve, just like a supply curve, but we'll label that AS, okay? And that makes sense, right? Because as prices go up, right, more GDP is being produced, right? As prices go down, less GDP is being produced. And we can see that real simply on this curve. Now, we can shift AS to the right, which would be an increase. AS sub 1, or we can decrease aggregate supply by shifting it to the left, AS sub 2. And you can see that right here. So this would be an increase, and this would be a decrease of aggregate supply okay? Now, how do we shift aggregate supply? An easy acronym to remember is RAP, right? And RAP is a change in resource prices, a change in actions of the government, but we're not including government spending because, of course, that's part of the AD, and then change in productivity. So let me go ahead and go over some examples, right? So change in resource prices, okay? If, you own a McDonald's, right? Or, McDonald's, right, is burger producers, right? All of the burger producers. Their resource would be ground beef, right? So if the price of ground beef increases, right, or domestic and the resource price increases of ground beef, then that's going to shift our aggregate supply curve to the left, right? Because that's an increase in the resource price. That means less people are going to be producing ground beef or producing burgers. So that would be a shift to the left. Now, if we were to decrease the price of ground beef, right, then that would be a shift to the right, okay? And then there's also things called supply shocks, negative and positive supply shocks. So a negative supply shock is going to be something that's going to decrease your supply, right? And unexpectedly. So like a hurricane, or let's say like a locusts start eating at the wheat or something like that, that would decrease your supply. That would be a negative supply shock, right? A positive supply shock would be if you grew strawberries, right? And in your strawberry field, you just had, 1 year where you're producing almost double of what you normally produce. That would be a positive. You get extra rain and stuff like that, and the sun and all that. It produces more strawberries for you. That would be a positive supply shock. Now, inflationary expectations, right? So if people expect higher prices in the future, right? Workers are then going to demand higher wages, and that will and costs will increase, right? And again, that goes back to our wage spiral, right? As prices increase, wages increase. But inflationary expectations, right? If people assume that the prices are going to explode or inflate quite a bit, what they're going to do is they're going to start buying now, right? As opposed to waiting to make that purchase. Now, changes in actions of the government. Now, that's a tax on producers, right? Subsidies for domestic producers, and government regulations. So if the government starts to regulate coal or regulate gas more than it does so already, right? They actually relaxed a lot of their regulations on gas, right? So we're started to frack, and so now we're able to produce more gasoline. And so the fracking example would shift the curve to the right, increasing aggregate supply, right? And then if we get a new administration and they start to get rid of fracking, right? That would, or put more regulations on fracking, then that would shift our curve to the left, okay? And then change in productivity. So technology, right? So a change in how much we're able to produce. So if we go to more automation, right, where computers are doing the work for us, like call centers and stuff like that, that would shift our aggregate supply curve to the right. If a computer virus were to kill all of the or destroy computers, right, that would shift us to the left, right? And so those are the three shifters. Again, it's change in resource prices, change in actions of the government, and then change in productivity. And so that's going to do it for us today for aggregate supply. Thank you guys, and we'll see you.